The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under my apartment door like a knife between ribs. Cream cardstock, gold embossing, my sister's looping handwriting announcing her marriage to Derek, my Derek, the man I'd spent 3 years building a life with, until she decided she wanted him too. I stood in my cramped studio, the envelope trembling in my hands, and wondered how someone could feel so hollow and yet so heavy at the same time. The radiator clanked and hissed, struggling against the February cold that seeped through the single-pane windows. Outside, the city rumbled with its usual indifference. Car horns, distant sirens, the metallic screech of the subway 2 blocks away. Inside, my world consisted of mismatched furniture from thrift stores, a hot plate that only worked on one setting, and the persistent smell of the Indian restaurant downstairs that had permanently infused itself into my clothes. I was invisible here. Invisible everywhere, really. At the hospital where I worked as a nurse's aide, I was the one they called when no one else wanted a shift. The one who cleaned bedpans and changed linens while the actual nurses took their breaks. At family dinners, back when I still attended them, I was the responsible one, the boring one. The one who'd never caused problems or demanded attention, unlike Vanessa. My sister had always been the sun, and I'd learned early to orbit quietly, content with reflected light. When she'd shown up at the apartment Derek and I shared, crying about some failed audition, I'd let her stay on our couch. When she'd needed money, I'd given it to her from my meager savings. When she'd started wearing my clothes and using my makeup, I'd said nothing. I should have known she'd want him too. The invitation listed the venue. Augusto's, an upscale Italian restaurant in Manhattan that I could never afford even if I saved for a year. The wedding was in 2 weeks. They wanted me there. Vanessa had scrawled a note on the back in her careless script. "Please come, sis. It wouldn't be the same without you. I know things are complicated, but I love you." I crumpled the invitation and threw it in the trash, but the words had already burrowed under my skin. Complicated. She'd fucked my boyfriend in our bed while I was working a double shift, and when I'd come home early with the flu, I'd found them tangled in sheets I'd washed that morning. The look on Derek's face hadn't been guilt. It had been relief, like he'd been waiting for permission to stop pretending. "Emma, this isn't... it just happened," he'd said, scrambling for his boxers while Vanessa had the audacity to look tearful and beautiful in my old NYU t-shirt. I'd moved out that night with 2 suitcases, and what remained of my dignity. That was 4 months ago. Now I pulled a double shift at Mount Sinai, my feet aching in the cheap sneakers that had worn through at the heels. Mrs. Patterson in 412 had vomited on me twice. A teenage overdose victim had coded and died despite our efforts, and I'd had to comfort his mother while still smelling like someone else's sick. The attending physician hadn't learned my name in the 6 months I'd worked there. He just called me you, or hey. By the time I stumbled out into the March night, I was so tired I could barely feel the cold. The subway would take 40 minutes. I couldn't afford a cab, but there was a bus that ran crosstown, and if I hurried, I could catch the 11:15. I ran. The bus doors were closing when I reached them, and the driver, bored, indifferent, opened them with a hydraulic sigh. I climbed aboard, fumbling for my Metro card with numb fingers, and collapsed into a seat near the back. The bus smelled like wet wool and someone's fast food dinner. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. There were maybe 6 other passengers, all of them looking as exhausted as I felt, all of us invisible to each other. I leaned my head against the cold window and closed my eyes. The bus lurched forward, and I let the motion rock me into a half-sleep, that dangerous space where thoughts become dreams and memories bleed into the present. I saw Derek's face, Vanessa's tears, my mother's disappointed expression when I'd told her I wouldn't be coming to Sunday dinners anymore. "You're being dramatic, Emma," she'd said. "Vanessa didn't mean to hurt you. These things just happen. You need to learn to forgive." I'd hung up without responding. The bus jerked to a stop, and my eyes snapped open. We weren't at my stop. We were nowhere near my stop. The driver stood, looking nervous, as 2 men in dark suits boarded through the front door. Everything about them screamed danger. They moved like predators, their eyes scanning the bus with the kind of cold assessment that made my spine straighten. One was older, maybe mid-40s, with silver threading through his dark hair and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. The other was younger, built like he spent his life in a gym, with tattooed hands and a jaw that could cut glass. Behind them, through the open door, I could see a black SUV idling at the curb, windows tinted so dark they looked like voids. "Everyone off," the older one said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Now." The other passengers scrambled to comply, gathering their belongings and hurrying past the two men like scared rabbits. I sat frozen, my exhausted brain struggling to process what was happening. "You too, sweetheart," the older one said, looking directly at me. I stood on shaking legs, my nurse's bag clutched to my chest like a shield. As I moved down the aisle, the younger one's eyes tracked me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. I kept my gaze down, trying to make myself even smaller, more invisible. I was almost to the door when it happened. My foot caught on something, a bag strap maybe, or just my own clumsy exhaustion, and I pitched forward. My bag went flying, its contents scattering across the bus floor. Tampons, a half-eaten granola bar, my ancient iPod, my work badge, and, mortifyingly, the crumpled wedding invitation that I'd apparently shoved into my bag instead of leaving it in the trash. I hit the floor hard, palms stinging, face burning with humiliation. "Shit," I muttered, scrambling to gather my things before these dangerous men lost patience, and did whatever dangerous men do to inconvenient obstacles. But then there were hands on my arms, strong, careful, helping me up. "Easy," a voice said. And it wasn't the older man or the younger one, it was someone else entirely. I looked up, and the world tilted. He was young, early 30s maybe, and beautiful in a way that seemed almost cruel. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on a movie screen. Sharp cheekbones, and a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. His eyes were the color of expensive whiskey, amber and gold and dangerous, and they were looking at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. He wore a suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, charcoal gray and perfectly tailored to a body that radiated power. The scent of him hit me like a wave. Sandalwood and something darker, something that made me think of smoke and secrets. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and his voice was dark velvet, accented with something I couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe. His hands were still on my arms, steadying me, and I could feel the heat of them through my thin jacket. "I'm fine," I managed, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Collecting her things, Marco," he said, cutting me off, and the older man immediately crouched to gather my scattered belongings. I watched in stunned silence as this dangerous-looking man carefully picked up my tampons and granola bar and work badge without a trace of judgment or disgust. He even smoothed out the wedding invitation before placing everything back into my bag. The beautiful man, clearly someone important, clearly someone these other dangerous men answered to, still hadn't let go of my arms. "What's your name?" he asked. I should have lied. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to lie, to run, to get as far away from the situation as possible. "Emma," I whispered instead. Something flickered in those amber eyes. Interest, maybe, or recognition, though I couldn't imagine why this man would recognize me. I was nobody. Invisible. "Emma," he repeated, like he was tasting my name. His thumb moved against my arm, a small circle that sent electricity racing up my spine. "You work at Mount Sinai?" He'd seen my badge. Of course he'd seen my badge. "Yes," I said. "Night shift?" "Yes." "And you take the bus home alone at midnight." There was something dangerous in his tone now, something that made the air between us feel charged. "I can't afford anything else," I said, and hated how defensive I sounded. His jaw tightened. Behind him, the younger man shifted his weight, and I caught the glint of something metallic beneath his jacket. A gun. Jesus Christ, these men had guns. "That changes tonight," the beautiful man said. "Marco, take her home." "What?" "No, I can't." "You can, and you will." His voice had gone from velvet to steel. "Do you have any idea what kind of neighborhood you're about to walk through, at this hour? Looking like that?" "Looking like what? Like a tired, invisible nobody in a stained jacket and worn-through sneakers?" But I didn't say that. I just stood there, trembling, as he finally released my arms and stepped back. The loss of his touch felt like a physical thing, a cold rush of air where warmth had been. "I don't even know you," I said weakly. His mouth curved then, just slightly, and it wasn't quite a smile. It was something darker, more possessive. "No," he agreed, "not yet." Marco handed me my bag, his expression carefully neutral. The younger man had already moved to the door, speaking quietly into a phone. The beautiful man watched me with those amber eyes, and I felt trapped. Not by force, but by the sheer weight of his attention. "The SUV or the bus, Emma," he said softly. "Choose." I looked at the empty bus, at the nervous driver who wouldn't meet my eyes, at the dark street beyond. I thought about my tiny apartment, the long walk from the bus stop, the shadows between streetlights where anything could be waiting. I thought about how invisible I'd become, how no one would notice if I just disappeared. "The SUV," I whispered. He smiled then, really smiled, and it was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "Good girl," he said, and my entire body reacted to those two words in a way that should have been a warning. Marco led me to the vehicle while the beautiful man spoke quietly with the driver, gesturing for him to go. The bus pulled away, and I watched my escape route disappear into the night. The SUV's interior was all black leather and tinted windows, warm and expensive smelling. I slid into the back seat, and Marco closed the door with a gentle click that sounded too much like a cage locking. The beautiful man climbed in beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, far enough that we weren't touching. The younger man took the front passenger seat, and a driver I hadn't noticed before pulled away from the curb. No one spoke. I clutched my bag and tried not to think about the wedding invitation inside it, about Vanessa and Derek, about how I'd ended up in a vehicle with armed men and a beautiful stranger who looked at me like I was something precious and breakable. "Where do you live?" he asked finally. I gave him my address, my voice barely audible. He said something in rapid Italian to the driver, who nodded. Then those amber eyes were back on me, studying me with an intensity that made me want to curl up small. "You're shaking," he observed. "I'm cold," I lied. "No," he said quietly. "You're afraid." I didn't deny it. He shrugged out of his jacket, the movement fluid and elegant, and draped it over my shoulders before I could protest. The weight of it settled around me like an embrace, and his scent enveloped me completely. Sandalwood, smoke, something uniquely him. "Better?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The drive passed in silence, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. I should have felt trapped, terrified. Instead, wrapped in this stranger's jacket, I felt something else entirely. Safe, which was absolutely insane. When we pulled up to my building, a walk-up in a neighborhood that looked even worse from the inside of this luxury vehicle, he studied it with an expression I couldn't read. "5th floor," I said. "No elevator." "Criminal," he murmured. Marco opened my door, and I started to climb out, already shrugging off the jacket to return it. "Keep it," the beautiful man said. "I have others." Of course he did. "Thank you," I managed. "For the ride. You didn't have to—" "Yes," he interrupted, his eyes holding mine. "I did." I stood on the sidewalk, his jacket hanging off my shoulders, and watched as Marco climbed back into the vehicle. The beautiful man's window rolled down, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. "Emma," he said finally, "that invitation in your bag, the wedding." My stomach dropped. "How did you—" "Don't go," he said, and it wasn't a suggestion. "Whatever they are to you, whoever he is, you're worth more than crawling back to witness their happiness." The window rolled up before I could respond, and the SUV pulled away, leaving me standing in the cold with tears burning in my eyes and questions I couldn't begin to answer. I didn't know his name. I didn't know why he'd helped me, why he'd looked at me like that, why his words had cut straight through every defense I'd built. I climbed the 5 flights to my apartment, his jacket still wrapped around me, and found a business card in the pocket. No name. Just a phone number embossed in gold, and below it a single word in Italian that I'd have to Google Translate. Mio. Mine. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on my threadbare couch with his jacket draped across my lap, turning that business card over and over in my fingers until the edges went soft. The single word stared back at me in gold embossing: Mio. Mine. The audacity of it should have made me angry. This stranger, this beautiful, dangerous stranger with his armed guards and his luxury SUV, had decided I belonged to him based on what? A clumsy fall on a bus? A glimpse of my pathetic life spilling across the floor? But I wasn't angry. I was terrified by how much I wanted to call that number. Dawn crept through my windows in shades of gray and pink, and I finally dragged myself to the shower. The water never got properly hot in this building, but I stood under the lukewarm spray until my skin pruned, trying to wash away the lingering scent of sandalwood and smoke. It didn't work. His jacket hung on the back of my bathroom door, and even with the door closed, I could smell it. Could smell him, rich and dark and completely out of place in my shabby apartment with its peeling paint and water-stained ceiling. I had 3 days off from the hospital, a rare gift that usually meant I'd pick up shifts at the clinic in Queens to make extra money. But when I checked my phone, there was a text from my supervisor. Someone called in a generous donation to staff wellness. You're covered for the week. Rest. My hands went numb. No one donated to staff wellness at Mount Sinai's Nurses Aid program. We were the bottom of the food chain, the ones who got scheduled for every holiday and forgotten at every staff appreciation event. I knew, with absolute certainty, who had made that donation. The business card seemed to burn in my pocket. I spent the morning cleaning my apartment, scrubbing baseboards and organizing cabinets and doing anything to keep my hands busy and my mind off the impossible situation I'd stumbled into. By noon, I'd run out of tasks. The wedding invitation sat on my kitchen counter, mocking me with its cream cardstock and gold embossing. 2 weeks. I picked up my phone 6 times to call Vanessa, to tell her I wouldn't be coming, to finally say all the things I'd swallowed down for months, but each time I remembered our mother's voice. You're being dramatic, Emma. Learn to forgive. My finger hovered over the mysterious number instead. I didn't call, but I didn't throw the card away either. The knock on my door came at 2 in the afternoon. Sharp and authoritative, I froze halfway to the kitchen, my heart suddenly hammering. No one knocked on my door. The building had a broken buzzer system, and anyone who wanted to reach me called first. Through the peephole, I saw Marco. He stood in my dingy hallway looking like he'd stepped out of a different universe entirely. Dark suit, perfectly pressed, expression professionally neutral, completely unbothered by the graffiti on the walls behind him, or the smell of garbage from the overflowing chute. I opened the door with shaking hands. Miss Emma, he said, his voice carrying the same Italian accent as his employer. I apologize for the intrusion. Mr. Castellano requests your presence for lunch. Mr. Castellano. Finally, a name to put to those amber eyes. I didn't call, I said stupidly. Marco's expression didn't change. No, miss, you didn't need to. I don't understand. The car is waiting downstairs. If you need time to prepare, I can wait. I looked down at my outfit, leggings and an oversized sweater that had been Derek's once. My hair piled in a messy bun, no makeup, still wearing the same ratty socks I'd slept in. I can't go to lunch like this, I said. Mr. Castellano doesn't care what you wear, Marco replied, and something in his tone suggested this was an understatement. But if you'd prefer to change, please do. I should have said no. Should have closed the door and pretended this wasn't happening, that I hadn't stumbled into something far beyond my understanding. Instead, I heard myself say, "Give me 10 minutes." Marco nodded once and took up a position outside my door like a sentry, his hands clasped in front of him, his eyes scanning the hallway with the same cold assessment he'd used on the bus. I closed the door and stood there, breathing hard. What was I doing? But I was already moving to my closet, pawing through the limited options. Everything I owned was either hospital scrubs or cheap basics from Target. Finally, I settled on black jeans that weren't too worn and a cream sweater that Vanessa had left behind when she'd stolen my boyfriend. Soft cashmere that had probably cost more than my rent. The irony wasn't lost on me. I pulled my hair down, brushed it until it shone, and applied minimal makeup with trembling hands. The girl in the mirror looked young and scared, and completely out of her depth. But at least she didn't look like she'd just rolled out of bed. His jacket still hung on the bathroom door, I grabbed it without thinking, draping it over my arm. If this Mr. Castellano wanted to have lunch, I could at least return his property. Marco's expression didn't change when I emerged, but something flickered in his eyes. Approval, maybe, or pity. He gestured toward the stairs, and I followed him down all 5 flights, very aware of how shabby the building looked through the eyes of someone who clearly operated in a different world. The SUV waited at the curb, sleek and black and completely out of place among the rusted Hondas and dented Toyotas that lined the street. A few neighbors watched from their windows, and I felt their curiosity like a physical weight. The driver, a different man than last night, younger, with a military bearing, opened the back door, and I climbed in. The interior was exactly as I remembered. Black leather, tinted windows, the lingering scent of sandalwood, but this time, I was alone. Marco took the front passenger seat, and the driver pulled smoothly into traffic. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet vehicle. "Augusto's," Marco said. My stomach dropped. "The Italian restaurant? In Manhattan?" "Yes, miss." The same venue as Vanessa's wedding. Of course it was. We drove in silence, crossing from my neighborhood into progressively nicer areas, until the buildings grew taller and cleaner, and the people on the sidewalks wore coats that probably cost more than my car, if I'd had a car. Augusto's occupied the ground floor of a building in Midtown, its facade elegant and understated, with ivy climbing the brick and soft lighting glowing behind frosted windows. A valet immediately approached when we pulled up, and Marco opened my door before I could reach for the handle. "Mr. Castellano is waiting inside," he said. I climbed out, clutching the jacket to my chest like armor, and followed Marco through the heavy wooden doors. The interior took my breath away. Warm light from crystal chandeliers bounced off cream walls and dark wood floors. White tablecloths gleamed, set with silver and crystal that caught the light like stars. The air smelled like garlic and wine and fresh bread, and soft Italian music played from hidden speakers. It was beautiful, elegant, completely intimidating, and it was empty. Every table sat vacant, perfectly set but unoccupied. The only movement came from staff in crisp white shirts, who moved like ghosts along the edges of the room. "Where is everyone?" I whispered. Marco didn't answer. He simply led me through the main dining room to a private area in the back, separated by a partition of frosted glass. And there he was. Mr. Castellano sat at a table by the window, the afternoon light turning his dark hair almost blue-black. He'd removed his suit jacket, his white shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and ink, tattoos that disappeared beneath the fabric, promising secrets. He stood when he saw me, and the movement was fluid, predatory. Those amber eyes tracked me as I approached, and I felt naked despite being fully clothed. "Emma," he said, my name a caress in that dark velvet voice. "You came." "Did I have a choice?" I asked, and was surprised by the edge in my tone. His mouth curved. "There's always a choice. You could have sent Marco away. Could I?" "Yes." He pulled out a chair, waiting. I'm not in the habit of forcing women to have lunch with me. I wanted to ask what habit he was in. What kind of man closed down an entire restaurant for a private meal, what those tattoos meant, and why his guards carried guns, and why he'd helped a nobody on a bus, and then decided she was his. Instead, I sat. He pushed my chair in with careful hands, and I caught his scent again, that intoxicating combination of sandalwood and smoke and something darker underneath. When he took his own seat across from me, the table suddenly seemed too small, the space between us charged with something I didn't understand. "You brought my jacket," he observed. I set it on the empty chair beside me. "I was returning it. I told you to keep it. I can't accept expensive gifts from strangers." "We're not strangers anymore, Emma. You know my name now. Only your last name," I pointed out. "And only because Marco told me." Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe. "Dante. My name is Dante Castellano." Dante. Of course it was. Even his name sounded like dark poetry. A waiter appeared with wine, deep red, probably worth more than I made in a month, and poured it into crystal glasses without asking. Dante watched me with those unnerving eyes, and I fought the urge to squirm. "Why am I here?" I asked finally. Because I wanted to see you again. You don't know me. Not yet, he said, echoing his words from last night. But I'd like to. I laughed, and it came out sharp and bitter. Why? I'm nobody. A nurse's aide who lives in a shitty apartment and takes the bus and can't even keep my own boyfriend from sleeping with my sister. The words were out before I could stop them, and I immediately wished I could swallow them back. Dante's expression went very still. The invitation, he said quietly. Your sister is marrying your ex. I grabbed my wine and took a gulp that would have made any sommelier weep. Yes. And they invited you to watch. Yes. Here, at this restaurant. Yes. The silence that followed felt dangerous. Dante's jaw had gone tight, a muscle jumping beneath the skin, and his hands, resting on the table, had curled into fists. What's his name? He asked, his voice gone soft and deadly. Why? What's his name, Emma? Derek Morrison. I set down my wine glass before I could drink more. But it doesn't matter. It's over. They won, I lost, and now I get to spend the rest of my life being the bigger person while everyone tells me to forgive and move on. You're not going to the wedding. It wasn't a question. I haven't decided. I lied. You're not going, he repeated, leaning forward. You're not going to stand there and watch them celebrate what they stole from you. You're not going to smile and pretend you're happy for them while they parade their betrayal in front of you. It's not your decision. You deserve better than that, Emma. His voice had dropped to almost a whisper, but it carried more weight than if he'd shouted. Better than a man who didn't see what he had. Better than a sister who would take what wasn't hers. Better than a family that asks you to swallow your pain for their comfort. Tears burned behind my eyes. You don't know anything about me. I know you work yourself to exhaustion taking care of others. I know you take the bus alone at midnight because you can't afford better. I know you keep their jacket and their t-shirt, and you carry their invitation like a hair shirt, punishing yourself for their sins. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. I know you're stronger than you think you are, and I know that when you fell on that bus and looked up at me, something in my chest broke open. I stared at him, my heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. This is insane, I whispered. You're insane. This whole thing is inevitable, he finished. You felt it too. Don't lie to me, Emma. I can see it in your eyes. God help me, he was right. From the moment his hands had steadied me, from the moment those amber eyes had locked onto mine, something had shifted in the universe. I'd felt it then, and I felt it now. This pull, this terrible, wonderful, terrifying certainty that my life had just divided into before and after. Before Dante. After Dante. The waiter returned with food I didn't remember ordering. Pasta that smelled like heaven, fresh bread, roasted vegetables glistening with olive oil. Dante served me himself, his movements efficient and somehow intimate, and I let him because I couldn't seem to find my voice. Eat, he said gently. You're too thin. I'm fine. You're running on fumes and stubbornness. Eat, Emma, please. So I ate, and the food was incredible, and Dante watched me with an intensity that should have made me uncomfortable, but instead made me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced. He asked me questions about my work, my life, my dreams before everything had fallen apart. I found myself answering, the words spilling out like he'd uncorked something inside me. I told him about nursing school, about how I'd had to drop out when my father died and the medical bills had consumed everything, about how I'd planned to go back someday, about the apartment I'd wanted to rent with Derek in a better neighborhood, about the future I'd built in my head that had crumbled in a single afternoon. He listened like every word mattered, like I mattered, and somewhere between the pasta and the tiramisu that appeared for dessert, I forgot to be afraid. I have a confession, Dante said finally, setting down his espresso cup. I didn't just happen to need that bus last night. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. What? I've been having you watched for 3 days. The restaurant suddenly felt very cold. Excuse me? He didn't look apologetic. Derek Morrison. He works for a company that does business with one of my associates. When rumors started circulating about his upcoming wedding, about how he'd left his girlfriend for her sister, I had someone look into it. His eyes held mine. They found you. I set down my fork carefully, my hands shaking. You've been stalking me, protecting you, he corrected. Do you have any idea how dangerous your routine is? The same bus, the same time, the same route home through one of the worst neighborhoods in the city? Anyone could have. So you decided to what? Orchestrate a meet cute on public transportation? I decided to make sure you got home safely. The rest? He shrugged. And there was something almost vulnerable in the gesture. The rest was fate. I should have been furious. Should have thrown my napkin down and stormed out and never looked back. But all I could think was that someone had cared enough to make sure I got home safe. Someone had looked at my small, invisible life and decided it mattered, even if that someone was clearly dangerous and definitely unhinged. Why? I asked. Why do you care about some random nurse's aide's safety? Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then, because Derek Morrison's father is Dominic Morrison. Do you know that name? I shook my head. He's a business rival. We've been circling each other for years, waiting for an opening. When I learned his son had destroyed you, had taken everything you'd built and handed it to your sister like a fucking party favor. His hands clenched on the table. I wanted to hurt him. Wanted to destroy everything he'd touched. My blood ran cold. I'm not a revenge plot. No, Dante agreed. You were supposed to be. But then I saw you fall, and you looked up at me with those eyes, and everything changed. He reached across the table again, this time catching my hand fully, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. You were supposed to be a weapon. Instead, you became something much more dangerous. What? I whispered. His smile was dark and beautiful and full of promise. Mine. I pulled my hand back like he'd burned me. I'm not anyone's, I said, my voice shaking. Especially not some mob boss who thinks he can buy people with expensive dinners and donations to hospitals. Dante didn't look offended. If anything, he looked pleased that I'd figured it out. I never said I was a good man, Emma. You're insane. This whole thing is insane. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Thank you for lunch, but I need to leave. Sit down. No. Emma, his voice dropped to that dangerous whisper again. Sit. Down, and God help me. I sat. Not because I was afraid, although I probably should have been, but because some treacherous part of me wanted to hear what he'd say next. Wanted to understand why this beautiful, terrifying man had decided I was worth orchestrating elaborate meetings and making cryptic declarations of ownership. Better, he murmured. Now listen carefully, because I'm only going to explain this once. He leaned back in his chair, rolling his shoulders like he was settling in for a story. The afternoon light caught the sharp angles of his face, turning him into something between an angel and a devil. Dominic Morrison has been a thorn in my side for 5 years. He runs drugs through the port, skims from the top, bribes the wrong people, and generally makes my life difficult. But he's careful, never leaves evidence, always has alibis, keeps his hands clean while his people do the dirty work. I opened my mouth, but he held up a hand. His son, Derek, is supposed to be the legitimate face of the family. Works at a consulting firm, dates nice girls, stays far away from Daddy's business. Except Derek got greedy. Started using his position to launder money, to make connections Daddy couldn't touch. Dante's smile was razor sharp. He got sloppy. And when people get sloppy in my city, I notice. What does this have to do with me? I asked, even though I was starting to understand. 3 months ago, I learned Derek was engaged. Not to you, to your sister, which meant he'd left you, his girlfriend of 3 years, for a woman he'd known for what? Weeks? That kind of impulsive behavior suggests leverage, blackmail maybe, or love. He said the word like it tasted bad. Either way, it was an opening. My stomach churned. So, you investigated me. I investigated everyone in Derek's life. You were supposed to be background noise. The discarded girlfriend, the boring sister, nothing important. He leaned forward again, but then I saw the reports, saw how you worked doubles to make rent. How you'd given up nursing school to pay for your father's funeral. How you still sent your mother money even after she chose Vanessa over you. Saw how you'd been erased from your own life, and how no one seemed to notice or care. Tears burned in my eyes. Stop. I saw your picture, he continued, relentless. And I told myself it was strategy, that I'd use you to get to Derek, to hurt Dominic where it would sting. I'd swoop in, play the hero, make you fall for me, and then parade you in front of them at the wedding like a trophy. His voice went soft. That was the plan. And then I saw you in person. His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that stole my breath. And the plan became irrelevant, because I knew in that moment that I would burn down the entire Morrison empire just to keep you safe. The words hung between us, impossible and terrifying, and somehow inevitable. You don't know me, I whispered. I know enough. He stood, moving around the table with that predatory grace. I know you're stronger than anyone has given you credit for. I know you deserve better than the scraps they've thrown you. And I know, he crouched beside my chair, bringing us eye level, that when you look at me, you see someone who sees you, really sees you. And that terrifies you more than my guns, or my reputation, or anything else. He was right, and I hated him for it. What do you want from me? I asked. Everything. His hand came up, fingers brushing my cheek with a gentleness that didn't match the danger in his eyes. I want you to let me take care of you. I want you to stop working yourself to death for people who don't appreciate you. I want you to move out of that shithole apartment into somewhere safe. I want, his thumb traced my lower lip. I want you to be mine, Emma, completely. In exchange for what? Hurting Derek? Destroying his father? No. Dante's smile was dark. I'll do that anyway. This is separate. This is about you and me, and the fact that I haven't been able to think about anything else since you stumbled into my life. My heart hammered against my ribs. This is too fast. Too much. I don't even... You feel it too, he interrupted. Don't lie to yourself, Piccola. I can see it in the way you're leaning toward me, in the way your pulse is racing, in the way you haven't told Marco to take you home. His hand slid to the back of my neck, fingers tangling in my hair, and I shivered. One dinner, he said quietly. Stay for one proper dinner with me. If you want to leave after, Marco will take you home, and I'll make sure you're safe but otherwise leave you alone. His forehead touched mine. But if you stay, if you give me a chance to show you what this could be, I promise you'll never feel invisible again. I should have said no, should have run. Instead, I whispered, one dinner. His smile could have lit the entire city. Dinner turned into hours. The restaurant staff brought course after course. Food I'd never heard of, wine that probably cost more than my monthly rent, desserts that looked like art. Dante talked about everything except his business. His childhood in Naples, his mother's cooking, the books he read, the music he loved. He made me laugh. Actually laugh. Deep belly laughs that I hadn't experienced in months. And when he asked about me, he listened like every word was precious. He wanted to know about my father, about the hospital, about the patients I cared for. He asked about nursing school and didn't accept my dismissive answers, pushing until I admitted that I still dreamed about going back, about becoming a real nurse instead of just someone who cleaned up after them. You will, he said with absolute certainty. I'll make sure of it. You can't just... I can. And I will. He refilled my wine glass. That's what you don't understand yet, Emma. I have resources you can't imagine. Money is nothing. Influence is nothing. If you want to go back to school, you'll go back to school. If you want to move to a better apartment, you'll move. If you want anything in this world, I'll make sure you have it. Why? I asked for the 100th time. Why me? He was quiet for a long moment, studying me over the rim of his glass. My father was in this business, he said finally. He taught me that everything is a transaction. Loyalty, love, trust. Everything has a price, and everyone can be bought. He set down his glass. I've lived my entire life believing that, building my empire on that principle. And then you fell in front of me, and for the first time in 32 years. I wanted something that had nothing to do with strategy, or power, or revenge. What did you want? To keep you. His voice was raw. To take you somewhere safe, and make sure no one ever hurt you again. To see you smile and know I put that light in your eyes. He stopped, jaw clenching. You make me want to be something other than what I am. And I've never wanted that before. The confession hung between us, vulnerable and dangerous. I'm not a good person, Emma, he continued. I've done things that would make you sick. I'll do worse things before I'm done. But with you. He reached across the table, catching my hand. With you, I want to try. I looked at our joined hands, his scarred and strong, mine small and trembling, and felt something shift inside my chest. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. I don't know how to be with someone like you, someone like me. Dangerous, powerful, someone who closes restaurants and has armed guards and makes declarations about ownership like it's normal. I met his eyes. I'm not sophisticated or exciting or any of the things you probably usually... Stop. His grip tightened. You're everything I've never had. Real, honest, good. He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that sent electricity racing up my arm. Let me take care of you, Emma. Let me show you what it feels like to be cherished instead of used. The word cherished broke something inside me. I'd never been cherished. I'd been convenient, useful, ignorable. Derek had kept me around because I didn't ask for much and didn't cause problems. My family had kept me around because I was the responsible one who could be counted on to fix things. But cherished? That was something else entirely. Okay? I whispered. Dante went very still. Okay? 1 week. Give me 1 week to see if this, whatever this is real or just some fantasy we've both built up. I pulled my hand back, needing space to think. But I have conditions. His smile was slow and satisfied. Name them. I keep my apartment. I keep my job. I'm not some doll you can dress up and put in a gilded cage. Agreed. Though I reserve the right to upgrade your security and make sure you're not taking the bus alone at midnight. Fine. Second condition, you tell me the truth. About your business, about why you really want to hurt Derek and his father, about what you expect from me. Done. Third condition, if at the end of the week I want to walk away, you let me. No manipulation, no threats, no, he interrupted. I blinked. No. I'll agree to the first 2 conditions. But I won't promise to let you go. He leaned forward, his eyes burning into mine. Because I already know what you'll discover this week, Piccola. You'll discover that you're mine, just as much as I'm yours. And when you realize that, when you stop fighting what you feel, you won't want to leave. That's arrogant. That's honest. He stood, extending his hand. 1 week, Emma. Let me show you what your life could be. I stared at his outstretched hand. An invitation, a promise, a threat, all wrapped together. Every rational thought screamed at me to run. This man was dangerous. He'd admitted to watching me, to planning to use me for revenge. He surrounded himself with armed guards and spoke casually about destroying people. He'd known me for less than 24 hours and was already talking about ownership and forever. But when I looked into those amber eyes, I didn't see danger. I saw someone who looked at me like I mattered. I took his hand. Marco drove us through the city as evening bled into night. I sat in the back of the SUV with Dante's arm around my shoulders, his jacket once again draped over me, feeling like I'd stepped into someone else's life. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere I want to show you. We crossed the bridge into Brooklyn, the Manhattan skyline glittering behind us like scattered diamonds. The neighborhoods changed, growing quieter, more residential, until we pulled up in front of a building that took my breath away. It was an old warehouse conversion, all brick and iron and huge windows that glowed with warm light. A doorman stood at the entrance, and he nodded respectfully as we approached. Mr. Castellano, he said, everything is ready. Dante nodded, his hand at the small of my back as he guided me inside. The lobby was stunning. Exposed brick walls, modern furniture, art that probably cost more than I'd make in a lifetime. We took an elevator to the top floor, and Dante produced a key. I don't understand, I said. He opened the door. The apartment beyond was enormous, an open loft with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, hardwood floors, a kitchen with marble counters and top-of-the-line appliances, furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. "This is one of my properties," Dante said, watching my reaction. "I've been using it for storage, but I had it cleaned and furnished today." He moved to the windows, the city lights painting him in gold and shadow. "I want you to stay here, for the week. Let me take care of you properly. I can't." "You can." He turned to face me. "Your apartment has a broken lock and no heat. The building is in a dangerous neighborhood, and you're too stubborn to admit you're not safe there." His voice softened. "Please, Emma, let me do this. Let me give you 1 week of not having to worry about money or safety or anything except figuring out what you want." I walked to the windows, looking out at the city sprawled beneath us. From up here, everything looked different. Cleaner, brighter, full of possibility instead of threat. "What if I want to leave?" I asked quietly. "Then you leave. I'll have Marco drive you anywhere you want to go." He came up behind me, close enough that I could feel his heat. "But you won't want to leave, Piccola, not once you let yourself feel what it's like to be protected, cherished. Mine." There was that word again, mine. I should have hated it, should have bristled at the possessiveness, the presumption. Instead, I leaned back into him, and his arms came around me immediately, holding me against his chest like I was something precious. "1 week," I whispered. "1 week," he agreed, and pressed a kiss to the top of my head that felt like a brand. Outside the windows, the city glittered with 1,000 promises, and I let myself believe, just for a moment, that maybe one of them could be mine. The first 3 days passed in a blur of impossible luxury. Dante appeared every morning with breakfast, fresh pastries from a bakery in Little Italy, coffee that tasted like heaven, fruit so perfect it looked artificial. He'd sit with me at the massive dining table, those amber eyes watching me eat like it gave him physical pleasure, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. He never touched me beyond casual gestures, a hand at my back, fingers brushing mine when he handed me something, the occasional kiss pressed to my temple or forehead, but the restraint felt deliberate, like he was holding himself back, and the tension between us grew thicker each day. On the second night, he took me to a private art showing in Chelsea. The gallery had been closed for us, just me, Dante, Marco lingering by the door, and a nervous curator who explained each piece with trembling hands. Dante bought 3 paintings without asking the price, and when I protested, he simply said, "You liked them. That's reason enough." On the 3rd day, I woke to find a letter on the kitchen counter in elegant script. "There are clothes in the closet. Wear whatever makes you happy. I'll be back at 7. D." The closet in the master bedroom had been empty when I'd arrived. Now it was full of designer labels in my exact size. Jeans and sweaters and dresses, casual clothes and formal gowns, shoes that probably cost more than my car would have if I'd owned a car. Everything in colors that suited me, styles that matched my taste. He'd been paying attention. I ran my fingers over a soft cashmere sweater in deep emerald and felt something dangerous bloom in my chest. No one had ever paid this much attention to me. Derek had bought me generic gifts, flowers on Valentine's Day, a necklace for my birthday that he'd clearly grabbed last minute from a department store. Vanessa had borrowed my clothes and never returned them, but Dante noticed what I liked, what colors made my eyes bright, what fabrics I touched with longing in store windows. I wore the emerald sweater that night when he took me to dinner at a rooftop restaurant in Manhattan. The city spread beneath us like a carpet of lights, and Dante looked at me like I was more beautiful than any of it. "Tell me about nursing school," he said over wine. "What made you want to be a nurse?" I'd avoided this topic for months, the loss still too raw. But something about the way he asked, genuinely curious, not just making conversation, made the words spill out. "My father had a stroke when I was 20, I said. He was in the hospital for 3 months before he died, and there was this nurse, Sarah, who treated him like a person instead of just a patient. She'd sit with him when we couldn't be there, read him the sports section, make sure he had extra blankets because he was always cold." I traced the rim of my glass. She made his death bearable. I wanted to be that for other people. Dante's hand covered mine. You will be. I can't afford. I'll pay for it. I pulled my hand back. No. I can't let you do that. Why not? Because I barely know you, and you're already giving me too much. The apartment, the clothes, I gestured helplessly at the expensive restaurant around us. All of this. I don't know what you expect in return, but I can't. Emma. He leaned forward. I expect nothing except the pleasure of your company. If you want to go to nursing school, I'll make it happen because seeing you happy makes me happy. That's all. That's not how the world works. It's how my world works. His eyes held mine. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Let me use it for something that matters. I matter? More than anything. The certainty in his voice made my throat tight. We finished dinner in charged silence, and when Marco drove us back to the loft, Dante walked me to the door but didn't come inside. Sleep well, Piccola, he said, pressing a kiss to my forehead that lingered too long to be innocent. Dante, I whispered, why haven't you tried to kiss you properly? His smile was dark. Because when I finally kiss you, Emma, it won't be at a doorway. It won't be a gentle goodnight. It will be me claiming what's mine. And once I start, I won't want to stop. His thumb traced my lower lip. So I'm waiting until you're ready to be claimed. He left me trembling in the doorway, my body on fire, my mind racing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the loft in one of the silk nightgowns that had appeared in the closet, trying to make sense of what I was feeling. This was insane. A week ago, I'd been invisible, heartbroken, barely surviving. Now I was living in a luxury apartment, wearing designer clothes, being courted by a man who looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. It should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt like coming home. My phone buzzed on the counter, the new phone Dante had given me on day 2 because mine had been a security risk. I picked it up, expecting a message from him. Instead, it was from Vanessa. Haven't heard from you in days. Are you okay? We need to finalize the seating chart. Please call me. I stared at the message, and suddenly everything Dante had made me forget came rushing back. The wedding was in 10 days. Vanessa and Derek would stand in that beautiful restaurant, the same restaurant where Dante had first told me I was his, and promise forever to each other while I... What? Sat in the audience and smiled? Pretended I was fine? Or stayed away and let Dante's world swallow me whole? I grabbed my laptop and did what I should have done days ago. I Googled Dante Castellano. The results made my blood run cold. Page after page of news articles, police reports, rumors. The Castellano family wasn't just mob adjacent. They were one of the most powerful crime families on the East Coast. Dante had taken over from his father 5 years ago and had since expanded their territory, their influence, their wealth through means that were heavily implied but never proven. There were photos of him at charity galas, at political fundraisers, always in expensive suits, with beautiful women on his arm. Women who looked nothing like me, sophisticated, polished, belonging in his world. And there were darker photos too, crime scenes, arrests that never stuck, witnesses who recanted, a pattern of violence wrapped in expensive suits and legitimate business fronts. I was reading an article about a warehouse fire that had killed 3 men when my phone rang. Dante. I almost didn't answer, but my traitorous hand moved of its own accord, accepting the call. You're awake, he said, his voice rough like I'd woken him. I can feel it. That's not possible. And yet, I heard rustling, like he was sitting up in bed. What's wrong, Emma? I Googled you. Silence. Then, and what did you find? Everything. The arrests, the fires, the people who've disappeared after crossing you. My voice shook. You said you'd tell me the truth, so tell me, are you a monster? More silence. Then, yes. The word hit me like a physical blow. I've killed people, he continued, his voice flat. I've ordered deaths. I've destroyed lives and burned businesses and done things that would make you sick if I described them in detail. He paused. I've never pretended to be a good man, Piccola. I told you that from the beginning. Then why? My throat closed up. Why am I here? What do you want from me? I want you to see that I can be something else. With you. For you, I can be... He stopped, frustrated. You make me want to be better, Emma. Not good, I'll never be that. But better than what I am. That's not fair, I whispered. You can't put that on me. I can't fix you or save you or whatever you think. I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm asking you to let me protect you. To give me a purpose beyond expanding territory and eliminating enemies. To be the reason I come home at night, instead of just another piece of furniture in an empty apartment. You don't need me for that. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone else. His voice dropped to almost a growl. Do you understand what it's like, Emma, to spend your entire life building walls, trusting no one, feeling nothing beyond the satisfaction of winning? And then you stumble into my world, and suddenly those walls are meaningless because all I can think about is making sure you're safe and happy in mine. Tears streamed down my face. This is too much. Too fast. I can't. Tell me to leave you alone, he interrupted. Tell me you feel nothing when I touch you. Tell me you don't lie awake thinking about what it would be like if I stopped being careful and finally kissed you the way I want to. Tell me any of that, and I'll walk away. I opened my mouth, closed it, because I couldn't lie to him. That's what I thought. He said softly, I'm coming over. Dante, it's 3 a.m. The line went dead. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Dante in jeans and a t-shirt, his hair mussed like he'd dragged his hands through it, his eyes wild and desperate and completely focused on me. I'm a monster, he said without preamble. I've done unforgivable things, and I'll do more before I'm done. But Emma... He stepped forward, crowding me back into the apartment. I would burn down the entire world before I let anyone hurt you. I would destroy everyone who's ever made you feel invisible or worthless or small. I kissed him. I didn't plan it, didn't think about consequences or sanity, or any of the 1,000 reasons this was a terrible idea. I just grabbed his shirt and pulled him down and pressed my mouth to his. For a heartbeat, he went still, shocked. Then he groaned like a man dying and kissed me back. It was nothing like the gentle goodnight kisses he'd pressed to my forehead. This was claiming, consuming, desperate. His hands tangled in my hair, angling my head to deepen the kiss, and I melted against him. Every nerve ending singing. He tasted like mint and coffee, and something uniquely him, and when his tongue swept into my mouth, I made a sound I'd never made before. Needy and broken, and completely honest. Emma, he breathed against my lips. Tell me to stop. Don't stop, I whispered. Please don't stop. He lifted me like I weighed nothing, my legs wrapping around his waist instinctively, and carried me to the couch. We fell into the cushions in a tangle of limbs, his body covering mine, and I'd never felt so safe and so terrified at the same time. His mouth moved from my lips to my jaw, down my throat, finding the pulse point that made me gasp. Mine. He growled against my skin. Say it, Emma. Say you're mine. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except feel. Dante, say it. His hand slid under my nightgown, palm flat against my stomach, burning through me. I need to hear you say it. I'm yours, I gasped, and the truth of it terrified me. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes blazing. No taking it back. No changing your mind. You're mine, Emma, and I protect what's mine. Possessive, I managed. Absolutely. He kissed me again, softer this time, but no less intense. You have no idea what you do to me. What you've done to me from the moment I saw you. I could feel exactly what I did to him, pressed against my hip, and the evidence of his desire made me bold. My hand slid under his shirt, finding warm skin and hard muscle and scars I wanted to learn the story of. He groaned again, catching my wrists. We need to stop. Why? Because if we don't stop now, I won't be able to, and I want our first time to be when you're sure. when you're not questioning or afraid or... I'm sure, I interrupted. Emma, I'm terrified, I admitted. Of you, of this, of how fast everything is happening. But I'm sure that I want you, that I've wanted you since you helped me up on that bus and looked at me like I mattered. His eyes searched mine, looking for doubt. Whatever he saw made him close his eyes and press his forehead to mine. Not tonight, he said finally. Tonight, I just want to hold you. To prove that I can be patient, that this isn't just about... He stopped. Let me earn you, Piccola. Let me prove I'm worth the risk. So I let him carry me to the bedroom. Let him tuck us both under the covers with my back to his chest, and his arm locked around my waist like even in sleep he needed to protect me. I've got you, he murmured into my hair. Sleep, Emma. I've got you. And for the first time in months, I slept without nightmares, wrapped in the arms of a monster who looked at me like I was something holy. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee. Dante stood in the kitchen, shirtless, making breakfast like this was normal, like he hadn't spent the night holding me, like we hadn't crossed some invisible line that couldn't be uncrossed. Morning, he said, looking up with a smile that did dangerous things to my heart. I patted over in the nightgown that had ridden up during the night, suddenly self-conscious, but Dante's eyes tracked over me with appreciation, not judgment, and handed me a cup of coffee made exactly how I liked it. We need to talk, he said. My stomach dropped. About last night? About Derek's wedding. He leaned against the counter, and even casual like this, he radiated power. It's in a week. You haven't responded to your sister. I'm not going, I said. The decision felt right, settled. You were right. I don't owe them my presence or my forgiveness. Good. He set down his coffee. Because I have a different plan. What kind of plan? His smile was predatory, the kind that makes sure they never forget what they lost. Over the next hour, he laid it out. Derek's father, Dominic Morrison, had been using his son's consulting firm to launder money from drug operations. Dante had spent months gathering evidence, bank records, emails, testimony from people Dominic had crossed, enough to send both father and son to prison for 20 years. I was going to wait, Dante said. Let them have their wedding, their moment of happiness, and then destroy them. He caught my hand. But I'd rather destroy them now and spend that day showing you what your life looks like when you choose me. You're going to the police? The FBI, actually. I have contacts. At my look, he shrugged. I told you, Piccola. I'm not a good man. But I have resources and I'm very good at making problems disappear. Won't this hurt you too? If they investigate, they won't find anything. His confidence was absolute. I'm careful. The Morrisons are not. I should have felt guilty, should have protested, defended Derek and Dominic despite everything they'd done. Instead, I felt light. When? I asked. Today. The arrests will happen this afternoon. He pulled me close. And tonight, I'm taking you somewhere special. Where? You'll see. The arrests made the evening news. I watched from the loft as reporters swarmed the consulting firm, as Derek and Dominic were led out in handcuffs as their lawyer shouted about false accusations and vendetta. My phone exploded with calls from Vanessa, from my mother, from people I hadn't heard from in months. I ignored them all. Dante returned at 6, showered and changed into a dark suit that made him look like sin personified. He found me standing at the window, watching the city lights blink on. How do you feel? He asked. Free, I admitted. Is that wrong? No, Amore. That's exactly right. He handed me a garment bag. Put this on. We're going out. Inside was a dress that took my breath away. Deep crimson silk that hugged every curve, elegant and sexy and completely unlike anything I'd ever worn. There were shoes, too. Louboutins with red soles, and diamond earrings that were definitely real. Dante, I can't accept... Yes, you can. He kissed my temple. Let me spoil you, Emma. Let me show you off. I got ready in a daze, the dress fitting like it was made for me. Which it probably was. When I emerged from the bedroom, Dante's eyes went dark with hunger. Bellissima, he breathed. You're going to start a war looking like that. Where are we going? You'll see. Marco drove us through the city, and I realized with a jolt where we were headed. Augusto's. The restaurant where this had all started, where Vanessa's wedding was supposed to happen in 7 days. Dante, trust me, he said. The restaurant had been transformed, where before it had been empty for our private lunch. Now it was full of people. Beautiful people in expensive clothes, champagne flowing, music playing. But when we entered, everyone stopped, stared, and then they bowed. Not literally, but the deference was clear. These weren't random diners, they were Dante's people, his family, his associates, his world, and he was presenting me to them. Everyone, Dante said, his hand at my back. This is Emma. She's under my protection, which means she's under all of our protection. The message was clear. Touch her, and you die. A woman approached, older, elegant, with Dante's eyes. So this is the girl who's made my son human again, she said in accented English. She took my hands. I'm Loretta, Dante's mother. Welcome, Cara. Thank you, I managed. She smiled. He hasn't stopped talking about you for days. Drove his father crazy before he died, God rest him. Always talking about business. Now it's Emma this, Emma that. She patted my cheek. You're good for him. The evening passed in a blur of introductions, of food and wine and music. Dante never left my side, his hand always on me, my back, my waist, my hand, claiming me publicly, making sure everyone knew exactly who I belonged to, and I let him. Because somewhere in the past week, I'd stopped fighting what I felt. Stopped pretending this was temporary or insane, or anything other than inevitable. Around midnight, Dante led me to the private section where we'd had our first dinner, but instead of a table, there was a small stage with a microphone. What's this? I asked, a question. He took both my hands, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked nervous. I told you I wanted everything, Emma. Your trust, your time, your heart. I meant it. He dropped to one knee. My breath stopped. I know it's fast, he said. I know you have every reason to run. But I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You make me want to be better. You make me believe that someone like me deserves something good. He pulled out a box, opening it to reveal a ring that probably cost more than a house. Marry me, Emma. Not because of revenge or strategy or anything, except the fact that I love you. I love you. And I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel invisible again. Tears streamed down my face. You love me? Desperately, completely, probably too much. His smile was shaky. So, what do you say, Piccola? Will you be mine? Forever this time? Every rational thought said this was crazy. We'd known each other for a week. He was a criminal. His world was dangerous. But when I looked at him, really looked at him, I saw past the danger and the power to the man underneath, the man who'd held me while I slept, who'd bought me clothes in my favorite colors, who'd destroyed my enemies without being asked. The man who'd looked at invisible, broken me, and decided I was worth everything. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. The restaurant erupted in cheers as he slid the ring onto my finger and stood, pulling me into a kiss that seared through me. His hands cupped my face like I was precious, and when he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes too. Mine, he said. Yours, I agreed. But Dante? Yes, amore? I love you too. His smile could have lit the world on fire. 3 months later, I stood in a different bridal suite, wearing a dress that made the one Vanessa had picked look like a dish rag. Loretta fussed with my veil while Dante's cousin, now my closest friend, touched up my makeup. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. I saw the engagement announcement. Mom won't stop crying. How could you do this to our family? I deleted it without responding. Another text, this time from an unknown number. Congratulations on your upcoming marriage. Derek sends his regards from prison. I smiled. There was a knock at the door, and Marco poked his head in. Mrs. Castellano. Not yet, I reminded him. Soon enough. He's asking for you. Says he can't wait anymore. Loretta laughed. My son has never been patient. Go, Cara. We'll meet you at the altar. I found Dante in a hallway, pacing like a caged animal in his custom tuxedo. When he saw me, he stopped. You're not supposed to see me before the wedding, I said. Fuck tradition. He pulled me close. I needed to make sure you're real, that you're really doing this. Getting cold feet? Never. He kissed me, soft and sweet. I just keep waiting for you to realize you could do better. There is no better, I said honestly. There's only you. He rested his forehead against mine. I love you, Emma. More than I thought I could love anything. I love you too. You possessive, overprotective, completely insane man. You're possessive, overprotective, completely insane man. Mine, I agreed. The ceremony was small, just family and close associates, in a private chapel Dante had apparently bought for the occasion. My mother hadn't come, still furious about my betrayal of Vanessa. I didn't care. Loretta had claimed me as a daughter, and Dante's family had welcomed me with open arms. When I walked down the aisle and saw Dante waiting for me, his eyes bright with tears, I knew I'd made the right choice. We said our vows in English and Italian, promising forever and always in every dramatic, romantic thing we could think of. When the priest finally said we could kiss, Dante pulled me into his arms and kissed me like he'd die without me. Mrs. Castellano, he murmured against my lips, finally. The reception was exactly what I'd expected. Lavish, beautiful, full of dangerous men in expensive suits and their elegant wives who treated me like royalty. We danced until my feet hurt, ate food that tasted like heaven, and I watched my husband charm everyone in the room while never taking his eyes off me for long. Around midnight, he pulled me aside. Ready to go? He asked. Where? Our honeymoon. I'm taking you to Italy. Naples, specifically. I want to show you where I'm from, introduce you to the family there, spoil you for 2 weeks straight. What about your business? Can wait. He kissed my neck. You're my priority now, amore. Always. As we left the reception in a shower of rose petals, I looked back at the life I was leaving behind. The invisible girl who'd worked herself to death for people who didn't appreciate her, who'd been betrayed and discarded and erased. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd been claimed by a monster, and learned that sometimes monsters were exactly what you needed. A woman who'd chosen danger and passion over safety and invisibility. A woman who'd found herself by letting someone else see her first. Dante helped me into the car, not the SUV this time, but a vintage Alfa Romeo that purred like a dangerous cat, and we drove through the city toward the airport. Any regrets? He asked, his hand finding mine. I looked at my wedding ring, diamonds and sapphires that caught the streetlights like stars, and at the man beside me who'd upended my entire world. Not a single one, I said honestly. He brought my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles. Good. Because you're stuck with me now, Mrs. Castellano. For better or worse. Mostly worse, knowing you. Probably. His smile was wicked, but never boring. As we drove through the night toward our future, toward Italy, an adventure and a life I'd never dreamed possible, I realized something important. Being invisible had been safe, comfortable, easy. But being seen, really seen, truly cherished, completely claimed, by someone who loved me enough to burn the world down for me, that was living. And I was finally, gloriously alive.